I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the High Museum of Art and our efforts over the course of the past couple years to really change ourselves in an effort to become a much more vital magnet within our community to really, hopefully, encourage the broadest possible public engagement with the museum. And for us, I'm going to provide a little context first, and that's this. At the High, we talk a lot about this, and we refer to this as the mantra of our DNA. Growth, inclusivity, collaboration, and connectivity. We want this to be our collective conscience. We want this to be the white noise of our existence, the stuff that informs all the decisions we make or the actions that we take as an organization. It's really exciting for us to see how our staff interprets this, and a lot of good things have come from it. But we're really relentless in pursuing this, increasingly so. And so it's been very exciting to see how our efforts to recalibrate our relationship with the community have become increasingly fruitful. So with that as context, I want to shift gears now and talk about 5 things that I think the High has been working very hard on to kind of put ourselves on the radar of that young professional or millennial audience. The first of which is authenticity. You know, we all are striving to find authenticity in this day and this incredible digital age. And for an art museum like the High, we tend to do that via engagement with complex visual culture. You know, we want to present the finest examples of artistic achievement that we can get our hands on and present that to our audience every single day. The flip side of that is that while the High has always, I think, had an extraordinary reputation when it comes to delivering great exhibitions, where I think we've turned a corner and where I think we've really raised the bars in terms of the diversity of content that we're presenting as well. If we're going to talk the talk, we got to walk the walk. And this shows you 24 exhibitions, really the featured exhibitions that we've done at the museum in the last 2 years alone, and more than half, 14 out of the 24, highlight important work by artists of color, women artists, and gay artists. You know, this is one of the most tangible aspects of our mission, and if we're really committed to being a place where all of Atlanta is comfortable coming together, if we're really committed to being a place where you can come and see yourself reflected in your institution, then we believe it has to start there. The second thing is, and you're going to hear some echoes in my presentation from what you've heard before, was price. You know, we did a lot of listening a few years back, and what we heard from people was that we were a little bit out of whack in the marketplace. You know, the truth of the matter is that as we listened, people said we were too expensive. We did some listening internally, and what we found out was that we were, you know, scaring everybody away, telling them that we were charging $19.50, but we had so many discounts in the marketplace that at the end of the day, our average ticket price was under $12. And then the third thing we did was we hired a local firm to do some very intentional listening to kind of find out with people on site, you know, what was that sweet spot for us. And the result of that was that we went from a tiered structure down to a one-price model. We got rid of all that, and we said, okay, look, if you're 5 and under, you get to come to the museum for free. Anyone else, we're going to charge $14.50, and we are going to be ruthless in eliminating those discounts and so forth. But again, this is an effort, as I remember when I was in my 20s, I was dirt poor. And so for a millennial audience, we thought that this made sense for them and sent a right message about wanting, you know, hearing what they were saying. We need the dollars. This is fuel for our mission, but at the same time, how can we meet them more than halfway in terms of accessibility? And the positive thing for the High was that the result of that was actually that we saw our revenue increase from admissions increase by about 20%, or about $200,000 positive to budget last year. The third area is what I would call be an agent of change. You know, as you heard earlier, millennials, young professionals, they want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. They want, like every other generation that came before, and for those of you that are millennials, again, I regret to inform you, but you're completely average. Every other generation that came before wants to make the world a better place, and to this generation is no different than that. And I think one of the ways that the High has distinguished itself in terms of its pursuit of that is the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, collaboration is a super important component of who we are as an organization. What's perhaps different for us is that we've really dedicated ourselves to saying, okay, we're going to reach out to the community, we're going to create the strategic partnerships, but only about 25% of those do we want to be with the usual suspects. In other words, the other cultural organizations. The other 75% of our energy, we want to focus on different nonprofit organizations. Because what we have found is that when you do that, it challenges us to think about our mission in new and creative ways, but at the same time, it exposes us to different segments of our community than we ever would have had a chance to engage. So that's been particularly exciting for us. The fourth thing that I would highlight goes back to that culture shock, LaPlaca Cohen's, not culture shock, culture track report. This is a generation, they're heat seekers, as they call them. They're very social, they want to be around things. And we've launched 2 programs in the last 2 years that I think have been successful. The first is our First Fridays program. A lot of places around the country will stay open late, spin some music, provide some food and drink. And before we really dove into this, we thought about it and we said, okay, we want to do that, but we always want to do something programmatic that's going to remind our audience that they're at a visual arts organization. Because as you heard earlier, at a certain point, you can go eat, drink, and be merry with your friends at that new restaurant, that new bar, that new club, and so forth. And so we decided that we would always have that component at the end that tied it more directly to their experience with their institution. Last year, as you can see, we averaged about 680 people every first Friday of the month. This year, we're averaging nearly 1,000 people. A second program that we launched last year was something called Highball. It's a craft cocktail competition. 16 mixologists show up. They each create a signature cocktail. We cap it at about 500 people. We nearly sold out both of the last years. Super fun, but it's just a different way for us to provide a gateway for people to connect with the museum. And then the last thing that I would highlight is the fact that I think we have a tendency to forget that, depending on which demographer you listen to, that the early end of the continuum with the millennials are now in their early to mid-30s. And those folks are creating families and so forth. And so at the High, we spent a lot of time focusing on engaging that family audience. And I think the one program that increasingly is a hallmark not only of our family initiatives, but really the changed relationship that we have with the community is our Second Sundays program. This is a day when we waive admission. Our education department rallies. They create a series of hands-on, family-oriented, art-making activities for folks to do. Pre-program back in FY15, on any given Sunday, we averaged about 1,650 people. The first year that we did it, you see it jumped to over 2,300 people. The next year, last year, in fact, 2,700 people. The last quarter of last year, it jumped to 3,000 people, and this year we're averaging over 5,000 people every second Sunday of the month. Every color of the rainbow, every walk of life, unbelievable energy on that day. And it's just been an extraordinary way for us to connect with the community. The results have been super encouraging for us as an organization. If you look at, again, inclusivity, we look at this a lot of different ways. By the way, all the numbers I'm going to share with you have been filtered for school tours. They are not included in these numbers. So one of the things that we really focused on was demographics by ethnicity. In the last 2 years, we've actually tripled it. We were about at 15% non-white participation. Last year, we hit 45%. This year, we're trending at about 48% non-white participation at the museum. What's encouraging for us is that if you compare that to Metro Atlanta, which is 51% minority majority, you can see that we're rapidly approaching our goal of truly reflecting the audience that we serve. This gives you some indication of that rainbow of people that are coming to the museum. We pay attention to that as a staff. We learn what we can from it. But at the end of the day, this is really what that means. And this is a photograph taken from a recent Second Sunday. And I promise you it is neither staged nor is it atypical of the audience that we get on this day. And in that one image, you can see African American, Asian American, Caucasian, you name it, all coming together to experience their art museum. That's why we do what we do. Household income is something else we pay attention to. Last year, we were really encouraged to learn that 44% of the people that came to the museum had less than a bachelor's degree. That's a big deal in Atlanta. You are probably not aware, but unfortunately, the Brookings Institution has said that for the last 2 years in a row, Atlanta is the #1 city in the country when it comes to income inequality. 44% came from households making less than $70,000 a year. That's why that Brookings Institution thing is so important. Sorry about that. 46% of those that came to the museum had less than a bachelor's degree. And you can see from this that we've got a great range in terms of age coming to the museum. So we're really encouraged by that. And I think especially at that lower end of that, you can see where our emphasis on families is really coming into play. And so the good thing for us is that the world's starting to pay attention. I think we're trying very hard to be a place where our staff comes to work every day. We're building a culture where people come to the office and very intentionally ask themselves the question, what is it that the High can do to change Atlanta? what's our role in terms of that? And it's been really exciting for us. And so it's been affirming, but we still have a ton of work to do. But thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about what we've been up to. My name is Rand Suffolk. I'm the Nancy and Holcomb T. Green Jr. Director of the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. I think when it comes to diversity and inclusion, what was important for the High is that we wanted to kind of move away from a model that essentially had one gateway for people to engage with the museum. In other words, big, blockbuster, sexy exhibitions, and ultimately create multiple gateways for people to connect with the museum. And that really meant that we had to shift the way in which we were really approaching our community writ large if, at the end of the day, we were going to achieve our goal of reflecting the audience that we serve. So I've been at the museum for about 2.5 years now, and one of the things that I found most encouraging was the fact that as we decided collectively to make a shift, really did not come across a lot of resistance. We really didn't have people that were kind of digging their heels in and saying, that's not how we do things around here. I was so excited and encouraged by the fact that people really kind of rallied around the notion of let's figure out what's next. And whether that was our board or our staff, or frankly, even our visitors, that it was, I think, just in some ways the best possible circumstances to try something new. We try and be sensitive in terms of the different channels we have for outreach to kind of target different audiences and so forth. We develop programming that we think makes sense for this segment or that segment of our audience and so forth. But sort of writ large, our goal is to attract our audience, not specifically an audience. And so we've tried very hard to be as disciplined as possible from the standpoint that if we're going to engage an audience for exhibition X or program Y, that we're going to continue to engage them over the long term and kind of have that ongoing sincere invitation for people to come and experience their museum. What's exciting about that for us is that we've seen that our audience in general increasingly reflects the community itself. We want to be the place where all of Atlanta is comfortable coming together. Not only do we think that there's something inherently valuable in attracting those audiences from a missionary standpoint, but we also think that it's incredibly generative to see what happens when those different segments come together at the same time. So whether it's rich and the poor, black, white, whatever it is, whatever demographic you want to choose, we think that kind of the mix is one of the things that gives us great strength and impact. Last year, we made a big change in terms of our cost structure, or our pricing strategy, rather. We went from a multi-tiered sort of system, we got rid of all of that and went to a one-price model. We dropped the price from not yet members paying $19.50 to everyone 5 and over paying $14.50. So we dropped it $5. And our experience across the board was pretty great. I think people appreciated the fact that we were attempting to be a listening organization and kind of meet them where they were. We sent, we believe, a great message when it came to access and the importance that we were placing on that. And at the end of the day, we really didn't get a lot of negative feedback. One of the key things that probably hasn't been said enough is that $14.50 is actually less than the majority of the children's pricing that the others in our competitive set in Atlanta actually employ. So at the end of the day, there weren't a lot of people that were negatively impacted by the shift in pricing or the attendant reduction in the amount of discounts that we had in the marketplace. I think the one thing for us that's sort of an ongoing reminder as we do this work is what I mentioned earlier, and that is to kind of continue to focus on bringing everyone with you. The challenge for us is that on the one hand, I think most people look at the shift in emphasis for our organization and they think that's a very positive thing, that including more voices, more folks that really reflect the city of Atlanta itself is by far and away a net positive. But there's also a group of people that that emphasis is being perceived as perhaps a sense of loss for them because they liked it the way it used to be. And they were, their soul was fed in certain ways. And I think for us, what we need to do is be mindful of the fact that those are individuals that we deeply want to retain as part of our family. And so how do we move them all along together? And as I mentioned earlier, I think that at the end of the day, it's a lot of a focus on developing the credibility that will keep people connected, as well as the kind of programming that's going to keep them both excited and inspired. I think that one of the most important things is to really focus on changing your culture. You can launch initiatives here and there, but at the end of the day, if you ultimately don't change your culture, I think you're limiting the true impact that you're going to have. There's a point where I think you shift from approaching this work philosophically to approaching it theologically, where you truly own it, and it's part of your DNA as an organization that really begins to show your ability to move the needle in some very key areas. So that, and also I think just an ongoing reminder about the fact that sort of stealing a phrase from, I think, the for-profit world, you have to kind of focus on relentless incrementalism, right? This doesn't happen overnight. There's no silver bullet. It ultimately has to be a series of gestures that are going to connect you more deeply with the community and build that credibility over time. But you have to be relentless in kind of pursuing that and embracing it every day. I think if you're able to kind of have a clear vision about what ultimately your goals are, then you're willing to kind of, at least from a gut check standpoint, say, are we still heading in the right direction? We may be not winning across the board, but these three things are nonetheless making us better. And if that's the worst that happens for the next year, then we're going to be okay. And we're still on track to reach our goals otherwise. And I think giving yourself both the latitude and exercising the patience to kind of let things evolve and to do so intentionally is super important. I think that one of the key things, one key piece of advice that I would give people is to measure it. Whenever you can, regardless of what you're doing, start to collect data. That's super important. And it doesn't always mean that you have to go out and hire somebody to do that for you. I mean, use SurveyMonkey, use the tools that you have, create a survey and put it out there for people. We load our surveys onto iPads that are strategically located around the museum and so forth. It doesn't have to be high tech in order to give you good, clear data that's actionable. And I think that it's so important because not only does that help define the decisions that you're making along the way, but it also underscores the progress that you're having. And so whether you're having internal conversations about what your priorities should be or next steps should be, or frankly, when you're using that data to convince stakeholders that you're heading in the right direction or that they should provide funding, et cetera, that is wildly important. When you're developing that culture internally, you want people that are very open-minded, that are willing to embrace change, that have a little bit of missionary in them, and appreciate the fact that we're a nonprofit, and all nonprofits exist to change the world, and the way we do it is our filter for doing that, in other words, is to engage people with the finest examples of artistic achievement that we can get our hands on. And to kind of get a team of people that are truly committed to that, as well as, I think, this notion that an art museum can be a real force of change within a community, that you can work at the institution and make a positive, immediate impact and realize that that's not only a responsibility but a privilege. I mean, those are the kind of people that are really going to make a difference in your organization and ultimately help the organization make a difference in your community. The role of the board in all of this is super important. They are a vital element of that equation, both from their leadership in preserving and improving, your strategic direction and emphasis. Ultimately, they have embraced the responsibility of transforming themselves to reflect the audience that's coming to the museum. And so without that board being a part of the conversation or really helping to drive things forward, you're going to hit a lot of stumbling blocks and have a lot of obstacles. So I can't say enough about having a board that's fully engaged with the true work of the museum.